I guess most importantly, though, is what it does to the brain of a young person. It interferes with learning. It interferes with motivation. What I guess I'm most concerned about is the susceptibility of young children and teenagers to the risks of experimentation and easy pleasure, so that we see them first taking a drug for pleasure and then subsequently taking it to deal with problems.
You're watching High Society with your host, David Malmo Levine.
Hello, my name is David Malmo Levine, and you're watching High Society, the crazy show on Pod TV where I just basically use the fair use concept of found information to make fair comment on issues of that matters to the public and the cannabis community in particular. And today, along those lines, we are stealing from Say No to Drugs, a 1986 anti-marijuana sort of propaganda with a special guest star, Carlton E. Turner, the PhD, drug czar and advisor to Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan during the 80s.
There is not a single thing known today about marijuana that wasn't known in 1974.
We have the National Film Board of Canada's Caninabis, which is a cheesy animated feature about a marijuana junkie puppy and his fall from grace. Now, the animated feature actually speaks for itself. It's just kind of silly, goofy. We're going to add it on at the end. But I will kind of briefly go through these clips with you from the Say No to Drugs, just some of the more outrageous comments or some of the more common ones. For example, when they talk about it affects this, it affects that.
It crosses the placenta barrier. It affects the developing embryo. It is fed out of mother's milk into a baby, and a baby can actually get high because the delta-9, the most active component, is in its pure state, stored in the milk. It affects the central nervous system. It affects the reproductive system. It affects the immunological system. It affects biological development. It affects the thinking process. It affects depth perception of the eye. It affects anything that a normal human being must do to perform in a complex society.
They're talking about THC that's been jabbed into little mice with big syringes, and they're not really talking about any of the studies done on cannabis users smoking intelligently in their own setting, in their natural environment. Because if you study cannabis on how intelligently it can be used, you find out there's not much evidence of harm and there's a lot of evidence of benefits. But if you study mice that's been jabbed with syringes full of synthetic THC, you find out that mice don't enjoy that, and that probably shouldn't happen. So that's mostly or all of what they're talking about here when they talk about cannabis effects. They're talking about cannabis's or synthetic cannabis's effects on mice. When they talk about impairment,
Jimmy's brother says he thinks better when he's high.
Oh, tell him to write down what he's thinking the next time he's high and let you see it. Then you can be the judge.
My first reaction to a young person is, if you think that you can smoke marijuana and you're learning better, try playing Pac-Man when you're high and compare that to your score when you're not high. That'll teach you quicker than anything else.
They're talking about impairment either by novice users or impairment that you might see on the black market when you don't know what strain you're getting or your cannabis is cut with other substances. They're not talking about the performance-enhancing qualities of cannabis that has been noted by people who take it in a ritual of understanding and or are familiar with it. So again, they're only talking about a certain kind of use here. Another clip you'll see talks about them using cannabis, young people using cannabis just to forget their problems.
It means learning to deal with boys, friends, a new body, sweat under your arms. The next time your face is going to break out. Do you think you need more problems?
Oh, right.
Well, I think that's what you should tell your friends. Adolescence is tough enough without drugs and alcohol.
But Melissa says it makes you forget about your problems.
Maybe while you're high. But when you come back down, your problems are still going to be there.
But I've found that as much as that happens, even more often people use cannabis to meditate on their problems and look for answers. And that would happen a lot more if it was legal. Of course, there'd be lots of role models there to point people in that direction.
You're both still in a process of growing. The chemical changes that have to take place to form breasts and hips, make your beard grow, make your voice change, just getting started. Do you think adding toxic chemicals like alcohol and that stuff that's in drugs is going to do you any good?
Think of doing a chemistry experiment. If you do it the same way every time, are the results going to be the same or different?
Same.
What if you add a new chemical?
Alcohol and drugs are powerful chemicals, guys. They have a powerful effect on young bodies. If you don't believe me, look at some of the Stonies you know. I mean, their chemistry experiment isn't exactly turning out the way it was supposed to.
Another clip you'll be seeing has some mention of Stonies, and look at their experiment on themselves, and look at how those Stonies' lives are working out. Well, a lot of times the Stonies' lives are destroyed by the Prohibition, and a lot of times the Stonies come up with wonderful music like the Beatles or pretty much anyone else, and you find that their experiments are working out fine. And finally, this last clip you're going to see is, well, let's just say the only association I could find between marijuana prohibition and the AIDS virus is that they seem like opportunities that the powerful tyrants use to prey on the weak and the vulnerable. But no, don't worry, smoking marijuana does not give you AIDS. I don't think you'll find anyone else with a PhD after their name who will back up Carlton E. Turner on that one.
Look at the evidence.
Okay, what's the evidence on kids and marijuana? What you've read or what your friends tell you?
Why all of a sudden do we have diseases now that are affecting the immunological system at a much earlier age? And I don't mean to scare people, but think about herpes and think about AIDS. When did we have the herpes and when did we have the AIDS? And what drug is very tightly associated with that? You will find that if you have herpes and you are a regular user of marijuana, you quit smoking marijuana, that active herpes case will go into remission much faster. If you have herpes and you're in remission and you can smoke marijuana, it will come out of remission. You look at the AIDS. If you look at all the people that have problems with AIDS, you will find that most of those people, greater than 75%, are heavy marijuana users.
So with that and with this Caninabis, smoke a couple of big gaggers, make sure it's organic so you're not hurting your lungs or the soil, and stay tuned for the next edition of High Society, as high as you get off the net.